Thanks very much. Yeah. Thanks, Aileen, for inviting me tonight. I've just put a few details up here about myself in the sense that I have done a few blog posts recently. I did a year in the life of a beacon project at Kew. Also talked about data. Talked about how beacons can work with Wi-Fi. So the reason I've just put that stuff up there is just so you can follow up if you want to. Okay, so got 15 minutes. So excuse me, I'm going to look at this because I did think I was going to be able to read something, but I can't. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Kew. You may not have been to Kew before, so I just want to set the scene on Kew. Talk a bit about the technology. Look this way as well. Also talk about the app experience. So we've developed an iBeacon app, just about to launch an Android app as well next week. And also talk about some challenges for you as a kind of user experience audience. So Kew. We have the largest living plant collection in the world. So from that point of view, when you visit Kew, you're looking at 30,000 species of plant and trees. We have 14,000 trees just in the 300-acre site at Kew in southwest London. The herbarium there, which is pictured, 7.5 million dried specimens, and there's a digitisation program going on as we speak. And at the moment, we've digitised about 800,000 of those specimens, and they date back to Darwin. We also have a sister site down in Sussex called Wakehurst Place, and essentially that is the biggest bio hotspot in the world because we're banking the world's seeds there. So we have a target to try and bank 20% of the world's seeds by 2020. And there's a figure there, 2 billion figure, which shows how many seeds we've banked so far. Apologies if you can't read that at the back. So I think just to sum up around Kew, there's lots of knowledge, there's lots of history, and there's lots of science as well. We have probably 350 scientists, and I think sometimes that gets missed. People don't realise there's a lot of science going on, with regards to just the work we do. So to set the context, the Beacon project at Kew, I suppose, is a part of that whole Internet of Things. So by 2020, 5 billion people will be connected and 50 billion things. So I think from the challenge from your point of view is that actually the scope and challenge is huge, and also so is the potential as well. And I think that's key for tonight, really. So analytics. I'm a product manager, so I try and use analytics or provide evidence to people rather than opinion. And there are a lot of opinions at Kew. So what I try and do is to tell people, how things are working, how things are going. So from an app download point of view, we've had the Kew app in iOS for 10 months or so. 7,000 downloads. Now, some of you may work where you get 7,000 downloads a day, but essentially this is a pilot project, so we were testing the technology. As I say, we're launching an Android app, and I'm going to talk about the challenge and the opportunity around Android as well later on in the presentation. We've had something like 200,000 interactions, screen interactions and sessions. I think also importantly, the thing about iBeacon is that there are impediments within an app because you have to turn your Bluetooth on. And I think one of the challenges around that is that people feel that people won't turn their Bluetooth on. For the people we've surveyed, 72% said they had no issue with turning Bluetooth on. And also it's quite London-centric, and we were surprised by this. I think one of the things to say about the app project is that we haven't massively trialled it at Kew, actually. It is one of those things where you get redirected when you sign up to the Wi-Fi. There's some table talkers, but it's not like a museum. You can't hang things on the wall. You can't say download the app because essentially it's a 320-acre garden, so it's very difficult to do that. So, a little bit about the technology, iBeacons. For the next couple of minutes, I just want to talk to you about how it works. I'm not a developer, but it is relatively simple to understand and see how they work. These are the types of beacons that we use at Kew. So they're contact beacons. There are lots and lots of beacons on the market now, and they're relatively cheap. So for instance, these are probably £25 each. So if you think about the beacons we have at Kew, we have 25 at Kew and we have about 15 at Wakehurst, so we don't have a lot of beacons. And obviously you can see that that's quite a lightweight infrastructure and it's quite cheap to put in place, really. One of my jobs is going around and replacing the batteries, which is a pain, basically, but you know, you can do that. There's apps now you can monitor and range the beacons and work out whether the battery's going to fail. So I suppose the point is that it's actually quite a lightweight infrastructure. So the code on the Apple side is essentially you broadcast what's called a UUID, and there's a major and a minor, and you just set those up, and essentially that allows you to broadcast to people. So as people walk into a zone, they can get the information, the contextual information. And that's how we've effectively done that at Kew, in the sense that if you walk into the Palm House, we layer on an experience. So if you walk in there, you will get information about our science, our history, and other bits and pieces of information that are relevant to you. So some of you may have heard of beacons with regards to just things like shopping. So from our point of view, this is all about engagement. We're not about saying get 20% off in the shop, okay? So that was really important. The thing about iBeacon, though, for iOS is that it's been around for 2.5 years. So, they were very quick to release this in iOS 7. And essentially, if you've got an iPhone 4 and above, your phone is essentially a beacon. It's acting as a beacon now. So the thing about designing for iOS is that you have to have an app. Now, the crucial difference for Android is, and I think this is where, as UX professionals, it's a really good challenge, is that for Android you can design for the physical web because you can take that app layer away. And I think, with 7,000 downloads, there are impediments to getting people to download, especially if they come to a visitor attraction. One of the challenges that I've tried to overcome is that beacons are about not walking around Kew looking at your phone when you should be looking at a beautiful environment. It's about being able to look up and appreciate your surrounding environment, because we layer on a context or some historical fact or a picture that actually makes things relevant. But I think that's the key thing around Android, around the Eddystone information, which is, you're designing for the physical web, and that is huge, because obviously people like Google and others will perhaps even relay beacon information in search going forward. Or if you're a brand and you've looked online, it takes your offline back into the shop, and it can give you information relevant to what you've been looking at. So I think there's a huge potential there. So the other thing I just wanted to cover is around audiences, and then I'll talk about some of the challenges that we've tried to overcome. We have 3 main audiences. We have lots of audiences, but we have 3 main audiences that we're trying to appeal to with the app. So the first one is a nature connector, and we know that 69% of people who are nature connectors bring their smartphone. They're looking for a shared experience. They're looking for inclusivity and a bit of variety. And there's some user story examples around how we tried to build up those people in our minds so that we could kind of design for them. We've got discerning sensualists, and again, they're slightly different in the sense that there's less phone usage, but they are looking at quality. They're probably more interested in things like our library, art and archives, because they want to see the Darwin specimens. They're interested in our history, and they want authenticity as well. And again, there's some user stories. I'll put these slides up afterwards. I think they'll be with the presentation as well, so you're quite welcome to come back to me on this. This is one of the audience we're trying to grow, because Kew has 1.3 million people visit our 2 sites. And we want to try and build that because obviously every time people pay, it means that we have more funding. So the aspiration is to try and get to 2 million people by 2020. And one of these new audiences is this exciting new experience hunter. So we know they've got more phone usage, so 72% with a smartphone. They're not intimidated by innovation. They like that social layer, and they like adventure. So from our point of view, Beacons were kind of set up for this, really. And again, there's some user stories around that. A little bit about how we've kind of progressed the design. I think when Aileen asked me to talk, I was like, I'm not a UX professional. I don't want to get, kind of killed on the design. But essentially, we have done the first version, and we've moved to the second version using the analytics from how people have fed back. We had a very serious challenge when you enter a beacon zone. So on the bottom here, you've got home, discover, and map. And in the new version, you've actually got plan, because we realised that people use the app to plan. It's a massive site, and people didn't know where they were. So just doing a simple Google overlay with the blue dot to show them where they were in relation to things in the garden was really good, and we got really nice feedback about that. The other piece of feedback we got from beacons is that we have beacons on trees, and people put on the iTunes feedback, wow, I've just got pinged by a tree, amazing, because I'm getting audio off this tree, or so from that point of view, it can be that kind of wonder moment. And actually that's all we're looking for. We're not looking for people to batter their phone for 4 hours, go around searching for zones. We're not doing treasure hunts. We're not doing things like that. We're essentially looking for that kind of serendipity moment where you're walking around and you get some information that's relevant to you, that's contextual, that you can use, that you can kind of learn from, a takeaway moment. So I think that's important, that we did feel that we needed to up the design. And obviously from Kew's point of view, we've got something like 1 million images. We've got a lot of images that we can kind of use and help to bring things alive, really. So from a visitor point of view, we do have a lot of repeat visits locally, but then we also have a lot of international visits. So it's really important to make sure that if someone's coming in for the day and they may never come back, it's important to make sure they get around and see everything. This was kind of how we thought the user flow might work before we even designed anything. I think the key challenge for you as a room from a kind of user experience point of view is that it's about context. So one of the challenges is context. The other challenge is around people scanning, not reading. That's nothing new. That's a mobile phone thing, I suppose. But the other challenge is about the experience is everything, because if people, we've been at pains to not tell people there's beacons. We just want them to have a mobile app and then get the information. We did have QR codes at Kew, and unfortunately we found that there was a lot of maintenance around QR codes. We still have 400 species pages on our website that could potentially link back to a QR code, but people didn't know to scan, even though there was an inbuilt scanner in the old app. And I suppose the most frustrating thing was that people were actually trampling the plants in order to scan the QR code. So that's not a good thing. So yeah, it's interesting. In other parts of the world, QR codes are huge, and I suppose some people see beacons as a kind of extension of QR codes because it just takes that friction away. Obviously, talking about capturing the user's attention, that's a challenge because, it's information overload now. There's lots of things that you're expected to do, and if you've got a phone and you've got your Bluetooth on, we are going to start talking to you. We're going to start sending you messages to say, you've entered the Palm House, you've done this. One of the things we've done in the new version of the app is, rather than ping people and then ping people again, we know that they've walked through a zone, so we'll have a 24-hour cooldown to say we're not going to ping you again. So we're learning that you don't over communicate with people. Basically, if they miss it, and it goes back to that kind of serendipity moment. Obviously, if you're a brand and you want people to buy, that is not what you want to hear. So it's different. That's why I talk about engagement. Keep the design simple and consistent. Again, I'm not telling you something you don't already know. So the context. This is the Titan arum, and it sits in the palm house. It smells of rotting flesh, and it flowers at night, and we're not open at night. So this is the context we can give. So in the kingdom of the plants, David Attenborough stuff, which we can't put on the website because of rights issues, but we can put time lapse in the app. So we've done we're going to very soon do a time lapse, and I use this in our proof of concept. When I built the proof of concept for this, I pushed the time lapse to outside of this plant to say actually this is the context. This is how we could use beacons. And I think that's really important. What mode are people in? And for us, it's about planning, exploring, engaging. But there's loads of different modes, and there's loads of different applications of beacons. They can be health and safety. They could check into the building. They can check out. And it's really important to know the mode. So people scan. They don't read. We have now got better stats on our version 2 of the platform, and we can know about dwell times, and what we've been able to do is to connect that up with the Wi-Fi because I work in IT as a product manager. I got a failing Wi-Fi project to take over as well. So I took the password off the Wi-Fi, and the usage went through the roof, and we were able to then stream video in the app because people could just easily connect. They weren't worried about data issues. And also differentiation matters. Show people different things. Give them lots of information, and a consistent design as well. So the experience is everything, so design for the experience. I think that's the Palm House. But all these pictures are used in the app actually as well. So it is about the experience when you visit Kew, and it's really important that we didn't want to do like a miniature version of the Kew website. We have a responsive website, but the problem is at Kew there's lots of trees, and sometimes that breaks your 3G connection. So we've looked at beacons as a really kind of low-cost way of getting information across. Another thing I think we could do a whole session on what that difference between location and proximity, and I think there's a big debate about that around beacons, so it's probably something for another day. But it is really important about understanding the difference between GPS and Bluetooth LE. Designed to capture someone's attention. It is important to make sure that you're alerting people to the fact that they've entered a beacon zone. And obviously in the new version, one of the things we are going to use now is geofences, because we can do that, and we're geofencing Sussex and Surrey content, so it looks like we've got 2 different apps. But I spoke to someone recently and they said they had 500 apps in the App Store. And that's a whole world of pain when iOS 9 goes to iOS 10, and essentially there is a chance to kind of have lots of geofences of content. If you're around engagement, you can do that and not have lots and lots of apps. And keep it simple. Don't make people think too hard. I think the key challenge, we've put audio on. We did an audio tour for spices. We put spice audio on 8 or 9 different spices, and the problem is the rules go out the window because you've got someone walking into a zone, and it's not like you've come in and pressed 1 and hear the first spice and move to the second one. They could enter at spice 4 and then they could walk away and come in at spice 8. So there's a whole content challenge. There's a flow challenge. And I think that's the key thing, which is around, that's the real thing that's really made our heads kind of spin a bit sometimes around how much information do you give them, and will they understand? Will they get it? So, and I think that's the thing about keeping things simple, but that is a challenge in itself. So to sum up, I actually believe beacons can help filter a digital experience if we design correctly, and also allow for simplicity, not the complexity. And from our point of view, the technology works. We've seen engagement levels high, 90% feedback is positive. Battery drain doesn't seem to be an issue, even though it was perceived to be an issue, but it's not. Wi-Fi and beacons work well. And I suppose that there's the big challenge around the physical web and big companies like Google kind of doing more with Eddystone. So to leave you, I think the challenge for all of us here is that we can now deliver content and experiences based on people's precise proximity to things using iBeacons. And that's just a kind of a summary of all those things that you're near to in a day, really. Thank you.
Time for questions. We're allowing time after each speaker for questions. It seems like it would be more relevant. So just let John manage that. Raise your hand if you want to ask a question. And maybe stand up so that people can hear you since you're not mic'd.
You can go first.
Just a quick one. Do you find that, sorry, I sort of missed the analytics section at the beginning, sure. But do you find that the majority of users are Android based on the iOS app requirement?
Yeah, so the majority, well, all of them have been iOS at the moment because we don't have an Android app. So we're going to have an Android app basically I've been trailing an Android app internally for 6 months. So we've been waiting for that Eddystone stuff to come out, and it only really came out over the summer. So, I'd love to talk to you in 3 months or 6 months, because there was this perception that, people only had an iPhone that came into Kew. And again, from our mobile usage on the website, that is just not true. So it's about that evidence piece rather than, there's an opinion from a couple of years ago. So essentially we need to just, we will be looking at those stats. I'd love, Android to go through the roof really, so we can kind of prove that more people have Android phones than Apple.
Yes. How do you actually introduce the system to people who come in? Like, what's the touch point?
Right, so that is a good question because it is so difficult. One of the things I did was sit with our visitor experience staff, and we've got 100 volunteers who don't get paid, who are passionate about Kew and know loads about Kew. So I sat with them for 2 weeks and did user testing to show them the interaction between people. Because I think if you say to a 70-year-old, can you sell this app for me to people, and it's a bit of a hard sell. So I did it myself, and they could see that it wasn't that hard. And again, obviously adding the Wi-Fi thing, that's helped because people can just download. I mean, 95% of the people downloading at Kew don't use Wi-Fi. They just download, 3G and 4G. But Wakehurst, you're in like a big metal box with no 3G, so Wi-Fi is so important. If you can't get them to download, they can't experience. So, so it is. It's important to engage with the visitor staff. We've got things like table talkers as well, but the other thing that I've done is on the Wi-Fi, I've done a 5-second redirect, so when you sign up to the Wi-Fi you get redirected to the page that tells you about the app. They'll probably discover that and take that away, but that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Yes. What happens once you leave Kew? Is there anything that the person gets to keep hold of?
Yeah, so this is the potential, I think, for us. In the first version of the app, nothing happens. But in the second version, we'd love to be able to do, one of the things we want to do is save for later. So if you're having a problem with your 3G or you've got flaky audio, you can save it for later and then kind of replay it. So I think that's one of the key things that we'd like to do. The other thing that we could get a lot more smart about is obviously linking it up with a social sign-in, and there's a social layer as well. But we haven't really gone near that at the moment. So.
It seems like there's a lot of kind of extra engagement you can do afterwards to encourage people to come back, maybe things that they've missed or things that are coming up. Yeah, I think that's the key thing. One of the things that we know we could do because of the way that we can track people. I mean, we're at pains to point out it's anonymous, and we just use it for app development and things like that. But because we know where they go, we could, when they come back, we could tell them, oh, actually, there's an exhibition on now that we think you'd like, and things like that. We do, the technology's there, but we're not really kind of taking that step forward. But I think once we get the Android version out, I think that's the kind of thing that we want to look at in the next 3 to 6 months, really. It's a good point, though.
Oh, one at the back.
Hi. Yeah. You mentioned early on that it's actually a complete new infrastructure that you were putting in. When you're actually proposing this, I mean, I know a new infrastructure is something that sends management teams into cold sweats. In terms of actually making the case for iBeacons and then convincing like senior stakeholders to actually go with it, what was it like? What challenges did you face?
Yeah, I don't think I was grey before I started actually, but no, it was okay in the sense that, I mean, I've only been at Kew 2 years, and I'd moved into this product management role, and I was trying to do it properly in the sense that I was trying to build a business case and build a proof of concept. So that's what I did. I basically got hold of an app developer that did about 4 days work with me to push a bit of audio, a bit of video, and some content in the Palm House in a kind of lightweight app. I then took that to our board and basically said, if you give me a certain amount of money, I can build a business, build an app, because one of the first jobs I got was to think about trying to make our app sustainable, our old app, and it just wasn't, unfortunately. So it was one of those things where we were trying to kind of, from a product lifecycle point of view, stop one thing and then perhaps potentially start another. And that was a hard sell because we were going through a responsive website, design, and people were saying, well, why are we doing an app when we've got a responsive website? But obviously, the way that I've tried to position the app is to say it's about an experience that you don't get on the website. It's about that contextual thing which you can't get, through the website. You've got all this other information on the website. So it has been difficult, but in some areas I think they've just said, go for it. You've provided the evidence, so keep doing it. And ultimately, I'm responsible for it. So no one else has to worry about it. So they let me get on with it, basically.
I think that's all we have time for.
Thank you.